All right, so we got a really interesting one today. Someone sent us info on this board game called Lata, and it's all about running a canning factory.
Yeah, a Portuguese canning factory from the 20th century. Sounds pretty niche, huh?
You'd think so, but stick with us on this one because we're going to break down how this game actually teaches some super useful skills.
That's right. You've got the game's description, and we're going to pull out the core knowledge it teaches you. So think of it as a crash course in some essential skills, all through the lens of canning sardines and mackerel.
Sardines and mackerel. Okay, so the game's played over 6 rounds, and each round has 4 phases. First, you've got the turn order phase, where everyone secretly bids action points to determine the turn order, so whoever bids the most goes first. Then there's the factory phase, where you buy production cards, which is your fish, tomatoes, olive oil, all that good stuff.
Take the ingredient.
Exactly. Then comes the produce and sell phase.
Where you?
Can your goods, and then you sell them on the market. And finally, you have the scoring card phase, where you can buy victory points.
Yeah.
So it seems like money and action points are your 2 main resources that drive the entire game.
Absolutely. And what's really cool is how these fairly simple steps lead to some serious strategic depth. You know, think about resource management. It's not just about getting the ingredients, it's about finding that perfect balance. Like, do you have enough sardines versus mackerel? You know, do you have the right amount of tomatoes for the olive oil you have?
Right. Like it's a whole production chain.
Exactly. If you neglect one input, your whole production grinds to a halt. And that's a lesson that applies to any project, really. You know, anything where you have multiple dependencies. And on top of that, you've got those action points, which are a finite resource. So you got to figure out how to best allocate them across all those phases every single round.
So it's not just about having the right stuff. It's about being able to use it at the right time. No, then there's the whole part about building your factory with those production cards.
Absolutely.
It seems like just collecting those cards isn't enough. You have to strategically place them to actually optimize your factory.
Absolutely. It's all about long-term thinking. You got to look ahead and think, what kind of canned goods am I going to specialize in? Which markets are going to offer the best returns, down the line? And those scoring cards you buy, they force you to constantly reevaluate your path to victory.
Now that turn order phase, where you're doing those hidden bids for action points, that seems like more than just wanting to go first.
Yeah.
You know there's some other stuff going on there.
Yeah, for sure. What's really interesting there is that you're constantly facing this trade-off between the value of going first and getting those resources versus conserving your action points for later in the round. So when you're bidding, you're engaging in almost like basic game theory in a way. You're trying to guess what your opponents are going to bid and weigh the risk of bidding too much or too little. It's actually a really fundamental principle in negotiations or market entry. You see this all the time.
Well, it's like this little economic ecosystem happening right there on the board.
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of economics, you're buying and selling things in the game. So that's got to teach you something about making, smart choices with your money.
Oh, absolutely. You're making these decisions about which production cards to buy, where to sell based on the fluctuating market prices, and when to invest in those scoring opportunities. And all of these decisions reflect real-world economic principles, You're dealing with supply and demand. You're making investment decisions, trying to maximize your profits. It's like a little microcosm of capital allocation.
Wow. And it sounds like you can't just stick to one single plan and win the game. You got to adapt because the cards that are available are going to change every round.
Right. You have to be adaptable. The conditions are constantly shifting, so you can't just rely on a rigid plan. You got to be responsive to what's happening, react to your competitors' moves, and find new ways to achieve your goals. That adaptability is a key skill in just about any field.
Yeah, you got to think on your feet.
Exactly.
So we've got a game about canning fish that teaches you about resource management, strategic thinking, auction dynamics, economic decision-making, and adaptability. Who would have thought?
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
It just goes to show how a seemingly niche simulation can actually provide some pretty widely applicable skills.
It really makes you think, what other seemingly niche activities or games or, whatever, might have these hidden lessons in them that you could apply to your own life or, your career or whatever it is you're into? What other unlikely teachers are out there just waiting to be discovered?
Right.
That's something to think about.
It is.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. We'll see you all in the next deep dive.
See you then.